The autumn sun hung gently over the city park that morning, casting golden streaks of light across the quiet playground as if the world itself didn't yet know something life-changing was about to happen. Single dad Ethan Walker had brought his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, for their usual Saturday picnic, hoping to distract himself from the constant weight of bills, repairs, and the never-ending struggle of making ends meet. He didn't expect that within minutes, a moment would unfold that would change the course of his life forever. It started with a faint sound, soft, trembling, almost swallowed by the breeze. A child's broken cry. That sound would pull Ethan into a story he never imagined he'd live. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of doing the right thing, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Thread. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. Ethan followed the tiny sobs until he found a little girl standing alone near the swings. Her blonde hair glowed in the daylight, but her face was streaked with tears. She seemed no older than 5. Clutching a stuffed rabbit with one hand and wiping her cheeks with the other, she looked utterly lost. Ethan felt an ache in his chest. He had seen that expression before, the helpless fear of a child who needed someone, anyone, to care. He knelt down gently, trying to calm her without scaring her further. The girl flinched at first but then looked into his eyes with a timid hope, as if she desperately wanted to trust him. Lily walked up behind her father, holding his jacket. She whispered to him that they should help the girl, because no kid deserved to be alone like that. Her empathy reminded Ethan why he tried so hard every day, even when life felt like too much. The lost child, who finally managed to say her name was Emma, told them she couldn't find her mother anywhere. She had wandered off while her mom was on a phone call, and the crowd had swallowed her up. Ethan felt a protective instinct rise in him. He remembered losing Lily once in a grocery store for 30 terrifying seconds. This girl must have felt that fear multiplied by 1,000. The sun climbed higher, warming the pavement as Ethan made calls to security and searched the park with Emma holding his hand so tightly it felt like she was holding onto life itself. They walked past cheerful families, food carts, and bright decorations for an upcoming festival. The whole world looked ordinary, almost joyful, yet for Emma, the day had turned into a storm. Ethan didn't rest until he checked every corner, every bench, every path. And with each passing minute, he felt the weight of responsibility deepen, not because he had to help, but because he wanted to. Hours passed. Ethan kept Emma safe, fed her snacks from Lily's lunchbox, and told her she wasn't alone. His calm presence soothed her trembling heart. Watching him, Lily asked if they could take Emma home if they couldn't find her mother. Ethan smiled softly but didn't answer. He knew life was never that simple, not with his finances, not with his unstable job hours, not with everything he struggled to hold together. But his heart, tender and worn from years of single fatherhood, wished he could protect every child who felt abandoned by the world. They had nearly completed a full circle around the park when everything changed. A sleek black SUV screeched to a halt near the entrance. The door swung open, and a woman stumbled out, her face drenched with panic, her expensive heels clicking desperately against the pavement. Her business-style white coat flared behind her as she sprinted toward them. When she saw Emma, her entire expression collapsed into raw relief. She dropped to her knees and engulfed her daughter in her arms, crying openly, uncaring of the people around her or the makeup running down her cheeks. That emotional reunion should have been the end of the story, but what happened next stunned Ethan. The woman stood up slowly and looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief, as though she was trying to process more than just the return of her child. She apologized repeatedly, her voice shaking, and explained that she had searched everywhere, contacted park authorities, and was moments away from calling the police when someone said a man matching Ethan's description had been seen helping a little girl. She thanked him, but her thanks carried something deeper, something heavy, personal. The daylight reflected in her eyes, revealing a tiredness beyond motherhood. She introduced herself as Victoria Hale, a name Ethan recognized instantly. She was the owner of Hale Industries, one of the wealthiest women in the state. Her face was familiar from magazine covers, charity events splashed across the news, and conversations people like Ethan only overheard but never engaged in. He froze, unsure how to act around someone of her status. But Victoria surprised him by kneeling down again, touching Emma's cheek, and saying she owed him more than words could express. Victoria asked Ethan how she could repay him. He shook his head, saying no repayment was necessary, that he only did what any decent parent would do. She stared at him for a long moment, her eyes flicking gently toward Lily, then back at him. It was as if she was seeing something she hadn't encountered in a very long time, genuine goodness without expectation. She insisted he at least accept her business card, though he doubted he'd ever use it. But the shock didn't end there. Later that week, when Ethan returned to work at the auto repair shop, he found a luxury car parked outside bearing a familiar signature logo. Victoria stepped out, dressed far more casually this time, her expression warm and sincere. She told him she hadn't stopped thinking about the men who protected her daughter with the kind of devotion most people reserved only for their own children. She explained how rare it was to meet someone who did good without cameras, without rewards, without needing to look heroic. Then she did something Ethan never expected from a billionaire. She asked about his life. Not in the distant, polite way wealthy people sometimes did, but earnestly, wanting to understand. And when she learned he was struggling, that he worked 2 jobs, that he barely kept up with rent but still chose kindness above convenience, something shifted in her. In that bright morning sunlight outside the repair shop, Victoria made him an offer, not a handout, but an opportunity. A position in her company's community outreach division, a stable salary, benefits, flexibility for Lily, and a chance to help more families like he helped Emma. Ethan was speechless. His entire world tilted in a single moment. Not because a billionaire offered him a job, but because someone finally saw his worth, the worth he'd tried to uphold every day, even when life pushed him to the edge. As Ethan accepted, tears welled in Victoria's eyes. She admitted that in her world of boardrooms, contracts, and financial empires, she had slowly forgotten what genuine humanity looked like, until she saw it in a single dad who refused to walk past a crying girl in a park. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, subscribe, and support Kindness Thread. Your engagement helps us continue bringing real, emotional stories to life. Before you go, drop a comment below telling us what you learned from this story. The sun hung high over the city, its warm glow spilling through the glass walls of one of the most luxurious restaurants, where a moment was about to unfold that would change lives forever. The millionaire, Adrian Vaughn, sat at a table dressed in perfection, but his heart was drowning in a storm no amount of money could calm. His wife, Elena, once full of life and laughter, now sat beside him in a wheelchair, her legs motionless, her eyes tired from countless hospital visits, miracle promises, and sleepless nights. Adrian had tried everything, doctors, specialists, therapies, experimental treatments, but nothing had restored her ability to walk. That afternoon, he wasn't expecting hope. He was expecting another day of silently grieving the woman he used to dance with. But hope had a strange way of choosing the most unexpected messengers. And on that bright day, hope walked toward him barefoot. If you believe in kindness, miracles, and second chances, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Thread right now. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. The girl appeared suddenly, her dark hair tangled, her dress torn in several places, and a small plate of leftover scraps trembling in her hands. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days, her cheeks hollow, but her eyes, those deep, steady eyes, held something unexplainable. Not desperation. Not fear. Something else. Something stronger. She stopped beside Adrian's table, staring directly at Elena. There was an intensity in her gaze that made the tired woman blink, as if someone had suddenly shined a light into her fading world. Adrian frowned, irritated and confused, wondering how she even got inside such an exclusive restaurant. Security was usually strict. But today, maybe fate opened the door for her. The little girl raised the plate and slowly whispered words so strange, so unbelievable, that Adrian almost laughed before she even finished. She told him she could help Elena walk again, heal her legs, if he would simply give her food. For a man who had spent millions searching for a cure, the idea sounded ridiculous, almost insulting. He had heard thousands of promises, but never from a child wearing a torn dress who resembled hunger itself. Yet Elena, with tears still clinging to her lashes, looked at the girl with something Adrian hadn't seen in months: hope. Real hope. A flicker that fought against her exhaustion and sorrow. Adrian, frustrated with false promises, chuckled under his breath. But the girl didn't shy away. She didn't step back. She simply repeated her request softly, the plate shaking slightly in her fragile hands. He was torn between disbelief and the guilt forming in his chest. Elena's gentle grip on his arm pushed him to reconsider. The girl wasn't asking for money, medication, or attention. Just food. And the sincerity in her eyes, steady, unwavering, felt like truth trying to break through all the cynicism he had built. So with a sigh heavy enough to carry all his doubt, he agreed. He asked the staff to bring her a fresh meal. The girl's face softened, her trembling shoulders relaxing as if she had been holding her breath for hours. She ate quietly, gratefully, finishing every crumb. Then, without hesitation, she placed her tiny hand on Elena's leg. In that moment, the air around them seemed to shift. The restaurant, bustling with conversations and clinking glasses, felt strangely silent. Adrian watched with a mixture of confusion and disbelief as the girl closed her eyes. Her expression softened, peaceful, as though she was channeling every ounce of strength she had left into that touch. It lasted only a minute. Just a minute that felt like a lifetime. And when she opened her eyes, they were glowing, not with magic, but with certainty. A certainty Adrian had never seen before. Elena gasped. At first, Adrian thought she merely felt an emotion, but then her fingers clutched the sides of her wheelchair, her face twisting, not in pain, but in shock. She felt something. Warmth. Movement. A tingling sensation rushing rapidly through her legs. She hadn't felt anything there in months. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered that she could feel her toes. Adrian froze, unable to breathe. He saw her attempt to shift her legs, saw the muscles twitch, saw the life returning to limbs that had been still for so long. It wasn't a miracle neatly wrapped in holy light. It was raw, trembling, unbelievable reality. And then, slowly, shakily, Elena placed her feet on the ground. The girl stepped back, watching silently, her empty plate held close to her chest. Elena gripped the edge of the table, her legs trembling like newborn strength awakening. Adrian reached out, terrified she would fall, but she shook her head. She wanted to try. And in the brightest daylight, under the stunned eyes of a dozen strangers, Elena rose. She cried out as her legs took the weight for the first time in months, tears streaming down her face. Adrian fell to his knees in front of her, clutching her trembling hands, overwhelmed by the sight of her standing again. The girl smiled faintly, relief washing over her small face, as though she had completed something she was destined to do. Before Adrian could say a word, she turned to leave. He called out to stop her, desperate to understand who she was, where she came from, how she did what no doctor, no fortune, no technology could accomplish. But she only looked back with a softness far beyond her years. And then she walked out into the daylight, disappearing into the busy streets as quietly as she had arrived. Adrian chased after her, but she was gone. Vanished into a world too big for her small frame. He returned to the restaurant, overwhelmed, shaking, unable to piece together what had happened. But when he looked at Elena, standing, crying, laughing through her tears, he stopped trying to understand the impossible. Some miracles didn't need explanations. Some miracles simply needed kindness. For days afterward, he sent people searching for the girl. No one found her. No one had even seen her enter the restaurant. It was as if she appeared only for that moment, for that purpose. Adrian eventually stopped searching, not because he gave up, but because he realized something profound. The miracle wasn't just that Elena could walk. The miracle was that hope had found its way back into their lives through the smallest, humblest hands. If this story touched your heart even the slightest, please like this video, share it, and subscribe to Kindness Thread. Your support helps spread stories of compassion and humanity. Before this story ends, tell me in the comments, do you believe miracles can come from unexpected places? And so, on a bright day filled with both sunlight and second chances, a hungry little girl walked into a millionaire's life, not asking for money, not asking for help, only asking for food. And in return, she gave the impossible. The airport was unusually bright that morning, sunlight pouring through the massive glass panels as if the world wanted to pretend everything was fine. But inside Alexander Reed, the CEO known for billion-dollar deals, ruthless decisions, and a life lived in penthouse isolation, there was a silence darker than any storm. He stood in the middle of the bustling terminal, dressed in a perfect black suit that made him look unbreakable, but the truth was hidden beneath the fabric. He had just buried the last person who ever truly knew him, his mother. And now he was flying home alone to an empty penthouse that echoed with the absence of a childhood he never got to heal. He had money, power, status, yet in that moment, Surrounded by thousands of strangers, he felt like the most lost person on earth. And that was when a tiny hand tugged at his sleeve, and a soft voice asked the question that shattered his walls, "Are you lost too, mister?" Before the story continues, if you believe in kindness, human connection, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the Kindness Thread channel. Your support brings more heart-touching stories to life. Alexander froze. He hadn't heard a child speak to him in years. He slowly turned, expecting to see a parent behind her, but the little girl stood alone, bundled in a red coat, a tiny green backpack shaped like a cat resting on her shoulders, and wide blue eyes that held no fear, only innocent curiosity. The terminal roared around them with rolling suitcases, distant announcements, hurried footsteps, and muffled conversations, yet somehow the space between them felt still, almost sacred. He wanted to say he wasn't lost. He wanted to say he knew exactly where he was going. But the words died on his tongue. Because for the first time, he realized he didn't know anymore. The little girl looked up at him with such genuine trust that something inside him cracked open, flooding him with a strange warmth he couldn't name. As he sat on the bench near gate 14, the little girl shuffled closer, her tiny boots tapping against the floor. She wasn't afraid of him, not even a little. She held a half-eaten cookie in her mittened hand, and to his disbelief, she offered it to him as if sharing with an old friend. No one had offered him something without expecting anything in return for as long as he could remember. He didn't take the cookie, but he felt his throat tighten at the gesture. He noticed that she kept glancing around, occasionally waving at passing travelers who smiled at her. Alexander followed her gaze and realized her parents weren't nearby. His heartbeat quickened. The thought of such a small child being alone in a crowded airport unsettled him more than any corporate crisis ever had. He shifted his posture, sitting straighter, suddenly more alert, more protective than he had felt in years. As minutes passed, he tried to understand why fate had placed this child in front of him on the loneliest morning of his life. The girl seemed to sense his sadness in a way adults never could. She pointed at the sky through the long airport windows, murmuring in a soft, hopeful tone, as if reminding him that some things, sunlight, warmth, new beginnings, were still free, still available to anyone willing to look up. Watching her, he felt something unfamiliar rise in his chest, something that made his eyes sting. He blinked it away quickly. CEOs didn't cry, not in public, not anywhere. But the truth was undeniable. This child, without even knowing his name, had reached a part of his heart no one had touched in decades. When an announcement echoed through the terminal, the little girl suddenly looked nervous. She reached for Alexander's hand, trusting him completely. The shock of that tiny hand gripping his large one stirred an emotion he had long buried, the instinct to care, to protect, to choose someone else over himself. He gently squeezed her hand back, feeling a warmth that spread through his veins. He looked around for airport security but found Northwest One immediately close. Instead, he noticed a woman appearing frantically from the opposite corner, scanning every face, panic etched into her features. She must be the mother. The realization brought both relief and a surprising wave of disappointment. As the woman rushed toward them, tears streaking her cheeks, the little girl brightened and ran into her arms, but not before turning back to Alexander with a smile that could melt stone. The mother thanked him repeatedly, breathless with gratitude, explaining that she had turned for only a moment to check their tickets, and her daughter had wandered off. Alexander nodded, assuring her everything was fine. But something deep inside him shifted. Watching the two embrace, the mother trembling with relief, the little girl giggling softly, he felt a longing so sharp it stole his breath. He had spent years believing he didn't need anyone. Believing connection only brought pain. Believing loneliness was safer. But now, watching pure love in its simplest form, he realized how wrong he had been. The mother prepared to leave, holding her daughter close, but the little girl reached for Alexander one last time, tapping her small finger over her own heart, as if telling him something important in the only way she knew how. He felt the message even without words. After they walked away, Alexander sat in silence, staring at his hands. Hands that had signed mergers worth billions. Hands that had built an empire. Yet those same hands had never held anything as gentle as trust from a child. He leaned back on the cold airport bench, overwhelmed by a storm of thoughts. He remembered his mother's final moments, the way she wished he would slow down, find love, live a life that wasn't measured in profits. He had brushed off her words, promising he would try someday. Now, sitting alone again, he realized someday had to start now. That tiny girl had unknowingly delivered the message his heart needed to hear. He wasn't living, he was merely existing. When boarding began, Alexander didn't stand. For the first time in years, he canceled his flight. Not out of fear, but out of clarity. He wasn't going back to an empty penthouse. Not today. Instead, he stepped outside into the bright daylight, feeling the warm sun hit his face. He breathed deeply, noticing the world around him in a way he never had. He booked a ticket for another city, one he had always wanted to visit but never had the time for. He called his assistant and told him he'd be unreachable for a week. And then he did something even braver. He called his estranged sister, someone he had pushed away for years, and asked if they could talk. That little girl's question had awakened something powerful, the desire to stop being lost. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Thread so more people can experience stories that remind us of the goodness still left in the world. Speech balloon special request: before you go, tell us in the comments, what moment of kindness changed your life? Alexander walked toward a new chapter that day, carrying with him the voice of a child who saw him not as a CEO, not as a powerful man, but simply as a human being, one who deserved to be found.